Understandably, there's been a considerable amount of comment in the media, on YouTube and mainstream. Inevitably, there's been a certain amount of bandwagon jumping by all the media contributors because it was a big story. However, much of the coverage has been simply piling on repetitive outrage. Some would say that's justified. Maybe it is. I want to talk about the facets of the case that have not been looked into, especially by the mainstream establishment. First of all, I want to go through the timeline of events as follows. At 11:07, street CCTV captures Henry walking from a pub back to his university halls of residence. Then we jump to 11:30. According to official records, Vickrum Digwa's brother phoned 999 to provide the police with the false account of racial abuse. For one reason or another, there seems to be little or no information in the public domain concerning those 23 minutes. I've looked at numerous mainstream media sites headed Timeline of Henry's Murder, yet they omit all the key facts and times during this missing 23 minutes. We know there's a video showing a brief discussion between Henry and Digwa. That's referred to again and again in so-called media reports. They all say the same thing and all leave out the same key information. There's been reports that Digwa used Henry's phone to video part of the attack, in which he chased Henry and stabbed him in the back and legs while Henry was trying to climb a fence. This was presumably after Digwa had stabbed Henry in the chest and taken his phone. So presumably this video is time-stamped, though no one has published an analysis of the timings. It's worth considering how long this attack actually lasted. Apparently Henry was stabbed in the chest, he ran, he was chased and stabbed again as he tried to climb a fence to escape. So let's do the maths and we start the clock now. Henry is stabbed several times and chased. Let's allow 3 minutes or so for that. 3 minutes is a long time when you've been stabbed in the chest. The official record says the phone call to the police was made at precisely 11:30. Somehow I doubt it was precisely 11:30, but that's what we're being told. Prior to that phone call, Digwa had contacted his parents and brother to hide the murder weapon and had time to discuss an excuse strategy. Well, that's got to take at least 5 minutes. So that's 8 minutes so far since the first stab wound. I'm deliberately trying not to exaggerate the timings. The phone call to the police, so we're told, lasted 12 minutes, and the police arrived 8 minutes after the call ended. Some reports have said 15 minutes, so let's stick with 8 minutes for now. That's 3 plus 5 plus 12 plus 8. 28 minutes so far. The police then walked over to the scene, rather casually, looking at the video, and asked Digwa how he was. There was a brief conversation. A policeman then walked over to Digwa's father, who was holding Henry upright against the wall to prevent him falling over. The father reported that Henry had blood in his mouth. There was no reaction from the police. The father let Henry go and he fell to the ground behind a parked car. The police officer then dragged him away from the car and proceeded to handcuff him. Let's say 5 minutes from the time the police car arrived and the point at which Henry was handcuffed. Conservatively, that's now 33 minutes so far since the first stab wound was inflicted. Okay. At some point, soon after this, Henry lost consciousness, but he was probably still just about alive. The official report says he was unresponsive, but not dead. Let's allow 3 minutes for him to lapse into unconsciousness. That's 36 minutes on the clock now. At this point, Henry was described as unresponsive, but no one has said he was dead. Presumably, around this point, the police then got around to calling an ambulance. The timings are not on record for this. Let's be generous and say the ambulance arrived in 5 minutes. It may have taken a lot longer, no one's saying. So at the very least, it was 41 minutes between the time Henry was stabbed and the time basic medical attention arrived. He lived and fought that long. He may still have been alive in the ambulance, so my figure of 41 wasted minutes is the absolute minimum. Could be longer. The establishment claims that the stab wound to Henry's chest was so severe that he was unsavable by the time the police arrived. Well, for starters, that's questionable. What is not in question is the fact that Henry took at least 40 minutes to die, and maybe quite a bit longer. Now then, had the Digwa family had the basic human decency to call an ambulance as soon as it became apparent Henry had been stabbed, the outcome may have been very different. He would still be alive today. Digwa has been convicted of murder, though even then the judge gave the jury the option to deliver a manslaughter verdict. And I find this a little bit odd. Manslaughter is only an option when the death is accidental. If you punch someone and they fall awkwardly and hit their head and then die, that's manslaughter, because the assailant could not have known that a single punch would be lethal. But if you shove a great big knife into someone's chest, there can be no doubt that it's going to be lethal if left untreated. The lingering suspicion has to be that the judge was still offering Digwa a way out with the manslaughter option. Digwa's mother is in jail on the charge of hiding the murder weapon. It's said that the brother and the father have gone into hiding, but why aren't they in jail? There's a British law called joint venture. It's an evil little law, and it has been widely used. I once had a conversation with a fairly young black man who had served many years in prison and was on a temporary release program pending his eventual release from prison. He'd been in prison for many years, convicted under the joint venture law. He was in a gang of boys who were at the scene when someone was murdered. The police couldn't pinpoint the actual murder, so they locked up the whole gang. Joint venture has been particularly unfair to young black men down through the years. And there was another case, I can't remember the details. A man and his girlfriend called a taxi. It's said there was some kind of altercation concerning the fare at the end of the journey. As a consequence, the taxi driver died. Either the man or the woman assaulted the taxi driver, both of them denied it, so they were both jailed for murder under joint venture. In other words, the courts knew full well that one of them was innocent. So locking up an innocent person is not that unusual in Britain. Digwa's mother, father and brother could, I suggest, be charged with joint venture murder. They had the chance to call an ambulance and most likely save his life, and yet they chose not to do so. The second option for all three would be assisting an offender under Section 4 of the Criminal Law Act 1967. For assisting an offender who committed murder, the maximum penalty is 10 years. Again, I ask, why is Digwa's brother and father in hiding and not in prison awaiting a trial? Finally, we come to the wider, bigger issue. And for a moment, allow me to digress. I've read of at least 2 cases where a roofer has fallen through a roof that he was repairing. The health and safety executive became involved in both cases. In one case, the manager was the controller of the warehouse on that day, but he wasn't the owner. He became aware of a leak in the roof and called in a roofing contractor. The company sent a man up on the roof to carry out the repair. Unfortunately, the operative fell to his death through a plastic roof window. The HSE successfully prosecuted both company owners and the warehouse manager under health and safety regulations. The manager was jailed because the HSE argued to a court that he had a responsibility to properly vet the roofing company before he allowed them onto the property. My point is this. This country has many, many laws explicitly written to put as many people as possible in jail. But of course, we now know that many of these laws will only be applied to UK citizens born and bred. Another such law is corporate manslaughter, whereby the directors of a company can be held responsible and prosecuted if someone gets killed because the company did not take sufficient care in the way it goes about its day-to-day business. Just imagine if it were possible to apply this law to the various members of the state organisations directly responsible for Henry's death, then we'd see quite a few people behind bars. Starting with the civil servants and outside consultants who wrote the justice policy guidelines in the first place, stating that people with different ethnicity must be treated differently under the law. We could also go for a number of persons within the Hampshire Police, up to and including the Chief Constable, who took it upon themselves to gold-plate the guidelines, making it mandatory for the police to elevate their response to a claimed racist incident above all other considerations, including ignoring a white boy bleeding to death in their presence. Police employees are complaining that if they do not adhere to this policy, they'll be fired. We now frequently hear the phrase two-tier policing. I suggest the problem goes well beyond the police. It's all part of the secret establishment policy to flood the UK with immigrants. In the short term, the intention is to treat white people as second or even third-class citizens, a leftover from when we were called subjects, not citizens, and to oversee the extinction of the white population as quickly as possible. My view. Government officials and left-wing mediaists say this claim is far-fetched. It certainly is not. Because of social media, this plot has suddenly been outed, but the plot itself is now well advanced. So there we are. Check out my other video talks in this series, please, especially the ploy to dismantle freedom and the plot to erase white culture. And please like and subscribe, because as things stand on YouTube, only the videos making the most outrageous claims ever get full exposure. See you later.